Happy Batman Day to what should be pretty much the majority of you if you are watching content on this channel, because obviously Batman and Spider-Man are my two favorite things to talk about in the world, my favorite comic book heroes from both respectively DC and Marvel. And it would be kind of blasphemous for me to pass over Batman Day with at least not celebrating the Caped Crusader in some way. Up until this point, though, I didn't necessarily know exactly how to celebrate him. I thought to myself, maybe I could do a McFarlane toy review, but that wouldn't be very definitive. It would be a variation of the character, and I did not have enough time to do some sort of movie reaction, movie breakdown, retrospective, or even a video essay on a video game. So as I looked around, I figured, actually, I still have these 3 limited edition, or somewhat limited edition, 4K Steelbook imports of what could arguably be one of the best interpretations of the Dark Knight himself through the master, or at least one of our respective contemporary filmmaking masters, Christopher Nolan, and then of course one of our best actors of our generation, Christian Bale, in the form of the Dark Knight trilogy. Before you see the limited edition 4K Steelbook sets that are actually imports over from Europe that we never really got to sell respectively here in the US, not through an exclusive through Walmart, Best Buy, etc. You actually have to import these. They're not necessarily all that expensive. In fact, you can actually kind of find them on Amazon right now for about 50 to 55, maybe 60 bucks a pop, depending on how they're kind of fluctuating in price. But here I am to finally give you guys a proper unboxing and review of this definitive set that I feel is probably one of the best ways to really celebrate the Dark Knight trilogy. So first and foremost, let's get the obvious out of the way. Each set is going to come in this nice, durable sleeve box that has kind of like a matte finish all around, with the exception of this glossed over kind of design on the front. For Batman Begins, for example, it's pretty much just him kind of like falling from the ceiling, that iconic shot from him falling down with the bats around him, but you can kind of make out the silhouette that is, like I said, has this kind of glossy kind of look on top of the matted finish. With the Dark Knight, it's actually Heath Ledger going through the city of Gotham in the police car, and then with the Dark Knight Rises, it's pretty much Bane taunting Batman there through the waterfall, but you can just kind of make out a silhouette that kind of breaks out the matted finish on the cover, and it's mainly Batman. For Batman Begins is, like I said, him falling from the top. For the Dark Knight, it's pretty much him kind of looking over the wreckage of the building burning down that unfortunately had Rachel on the inside. And then with the Dark Knight Rises, it's him for what appears to be kind of riding around on the Batpod. Each of these sleeve cases is pretty durable and pretty sturdy. It's some that you've kind of seen before, and I kind of would have liked a metal case, but still what they're dealing with here and what the packaging and the value that they're kind of adding to each set, I'm down for it. I'm still going to be able to take it because, like I said, it's still premium quality and pretty durable. It even has a nice little kind of coating on the inside. It's not like a clothy or wool-like kind of clothing to protect the materials inside, but it's still not straight up just cardboard. They kind of added this extra little texture to at least keep things safe on the inside. And then on the outside, you actually have this insert that would typically just kind of come off upon removing the cellophane, but it's actually glued on rather well. I could remove it because the adhesive, you can kind of tell that it's coming off the more you peel it away, but it's doing a formidable job of staying put and kind of protecting the top and the back, that I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it on there for design's sake. It looks pretty well right there, and it's not really causing any major damage. Plus, we're not really missing out on any grand design on the back. You can just kind of see a little bit of that glossy Batman silhouette just bleeding on over to the backside. So I figured, you know what, if nothing is really being compromised there as far as design, I'm just going to leave this insert sticked on. And then the second denominator that you're going to pretty much find across all 3 sets are, of course, what I always strive to collect for, and what I was waiting on a major retailer like Best Buy to jump on the chance, and yet they never did: the Steelbooks themselves. And they do in fact come with imported versions of the 4K discs. The discs don't necessarily look all that different than the standard 4K that you can find right now in major retailers, whether it be walking in through brick and mortar stores or ordering them directly from Amazon with the standard PG-13 rating, which I will admit is a little weird to not see labeled on these discs. You just have the very kind of obnoxious Peggy 12 logo on each of the discs, but upon removing them, you'll notice that you have some pretty clean artwork for all three of the steelbooks. I would probably say the Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises have probably the weirdest choices for the inserts on the inside of the steelbooks, with the design of Batman training. And I guess you gotta say that one's a little bit more symbolic, but the Dark Knight Rises, much like with the film itself, has probably the worst one of simply just Bruce and Catwoman dancing there. I feel like they could have gone for a much more iconic shot from the Dark Knight Rises that they could have extrapolated from, especially with the cinematography that goes on in that film. But then on the outside, you'll notice that they pretty much took the artwork you see at the front of these sleeve cases and pretty much just kind of replicated it on the front of the steelbooks. Nevertheless, they're still really good shots. Batman Begins, in my opinion, probably has the worst one of simply just Batman standing there at the top. I feel like, again, they could have gone with a much more iconic shot, like the one of him dropping down with all the bats kind of flying around him through that building. But for the Dark Knight, you have, of course, the iconic Joker, played by Heath Ledger, driving around there like a maniac with the police car through Gotham City, and that shot very, very much resonates with everybody that has seen that movie. So it's a good choice for not only the sleeve cover but also for the steelbook itself. And then with the Dark Knight Rises, you have the intimidating pose that Bane strikes there, kind of taunting Batman to be like, "Hey, come at me, bro," kind of like that stance. However, regardless of how you feel about the front of these steelbooks, it's actually the back that looks really, really cool and feels uniformal while at the same time very thematically tied to the rest of these movies. With Batman, you have, of course, just a standard bat logo with several different shadows of bats flying in the background. And with the Dark Knight, you have the most simplistic yet still kind of effective one of the chalk outline of the bat there from the pretty much the No Man's Land segment of that movie. But then you get to the Dark Knight, and surprise, surprise, this is arguably my favorite one. It's simply just a burnt out bat logo, but surrounding it, just a bunch of very ominous looking ha 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 ha's with a reflective kind of coating onto them that really pops. What exactly makes these sets stand out and make them kind of essential for any fan of the Dark Knight trilogy to import them through some kind of third-party site or Amazon themselves? Well, here's the thing, they added some extra value to kind of sweeten the deal a little bit for each of the three sets that makes them very collectible. Because aside from the steelbook, when you kind of take everything out from the inside of the sleeve case, you'll notice that each of these sets come with this nice, really well-made envelope that pretty much encloses all of the physical goodies that each of these sets come in. And it's funny because I can go ahead and jump directly into the contents inside, but there's also another level of uniformity to these nice little sleeve kind of containers that houses everything inside. Of course, to no surprise to anyone, my favorite one is the Dark Knight one because, of course, it comes with the nice little kind of broken or shimmering Dark Knight logo, and then surrounding it a bunch of ha-ha-ha's very ominously. And all of them come with this matted finish, but then you have the bat symbol with, again, that very glossy kind of coating over it. That just makes everything kind of feel a little bit premium. But to me, my favorite one is the Dark Knight, but the other ones are still pretty respective in and of themselves. The Dark Knight Rises one has a broken bat symbol with a bunch of those little chalk outlines around it. And then, of course, the more straightforward one, Batman Begins, with the static bat symbol and then a bunch of bats flying all around it. Once you open these things, you'll then get a handful of nice physical goodies for all three. The most common one is pretty much a set of on-set photos kind of printed onto these cardboard cards that are actually pretty well feeling. Like, they're pretty premium quality as far as how they handle. They don't feel flimsy. They feel like actual storyboard cards that you would want to put up on the wall, but on them are these glossy finishes of photos from the film. They range between being pretty much screenshots of the movie versus on-set photos that some photographer kind of took while they were rehearsing certain scenes or kind of going over different takes, different variations of a scene, etc. And the funny thing is that for all three movies, as I kind of flipped through these pictures and saw some of them pretty much being iconic replications of what you've seen before from on-set photos, like the one of Joker kind of just standing ominously in the middle of the street, to then other shots of, say, for example, Bruce climbing up the mountain from Batman Begins, and then with The Dark Knight Rises of John Blake, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, kind of peering over and looking around dangerously. Yeah, all these shots, I kind of took a closer look and noticed that they kind of vary in quality as far as the printing is concerned. The color actually really pops for all of these different shots. That feels very well saturated. It kind of pops off the card. But it's the resolution where we get varying degrees of quality. Some shots actually look really sharp and really clean. They look like they look really well printed on the card. And then others look a little blurry. And that's not to say that they're kind of like inaction shots. Like some shots that show fights going down, specifically one in the monastery between the fake Ra's al Ghul and Bruce at the beginning of Batman Begins. I understand that, it's an action. But then there's others that look a little blurry. But I remember this moment in the movie being pretty static, so I don't understand why they kind of maybe misprinted some of these, or maybe the ink was going a little weird as far as the printer that was used in the machine here. So your mileage may vary depending on how these pictures may look for you should you import these. The other common little goodie that comes inside of these pockets is also going to be what I like to call a visualization of the movie, or a visual novelization of the movie itself, in the form of this booklet that pretty much has some really cool artwork at the front in a matted finish. Once again, you have the bat symbol there with a glossy finish on it that really makes it pop. And then on the back, some more iconic shots of each respective movie. For example, for Batman Begins, you have the throne from the monastery. From The Dark Knight, you have the clown masks from the opening robbery. And then from The Dark Knight Rises, you have a shot of that giant kind of thing that Bruce needs to climb in order to get out of that underground prison. However, we then get into some conflicting feelings I have for what's awaiting you inside, because I was expecting a legit, rather brief, but still legitimate novelization of the movie, or maybe some kind of behind-the-scenes notes that you can read up on, or some kind of personalized letter from one of the producers, or maybe Christopher Nolan himself kind of breaking down the making of the movie, etc. Except as you flip through the pages, you'll then notice that it's pretty much just more shots from the movie that pretty much just kind of recap the movie. And furthermore, Batman Begins is the only one that actually recaps the movie from beginning to end. As you kind of flip through the pages, you'll notice that the pictures are actually in chronological order, and it pretty much just sums up the entirety of the movie from beginning to end. Once you get to The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, it kind of jumbles up a little bit. And The Dark Knight Rises is actually pretty much the one that's kind of in the middle, where they kind of shuffle one or two little events in that really bloated up movie, but for the most part, it tells a rather cohesive retelling of the movie in picture format. It's the Dark Knight one that not only completely omits huge events from the movie, but it also kind of shifts certain things out of order. Like you have the hospital bit before the burning of the buildings that take Rachel's life and scars Harvey Dent. And speaking of scarring Harvey Dent, it still kind of skews away from that big element of the movie, which is the birth of Two-Face. It's almost like these booklets were all made prior to the release of the film, almost like they don't want to ruin the marketing of the movie, or they don't want to ruin certain spoilers for the film. And I'm like, the movies have been out for almost 15 years. I don't understand why it is that we're still kind of skewing away from big important factors of the movie the way that other merchandisers or other big product lines that kind of pay homage to this film are really doing. But there are a couple of little goodies thrown in that separates a couple of these sets from the others. For example, each one comes with some form of card that is not necessarily just another on-set photo or a screen grab of the film. You actually have something that's kind of giving you just a peek, just a window peek into the development of the film. For example, for Batman Begins, you get two cards, one of which shows Batman perched up what I'm assuming is the scene where he has to rescue Rachel from the grasp of Scarecrow, when they're kind of looking around and he's like, oh, the Batman's here. You see a shot of the film, but when you flip the card, you'll then notice that you actually have a concept artwork that Lindy Hemming constructed for the costume of the Batsuit. And then a second card shows a screen grab of a young Bruce looking up from where he fell into the Batcave. But when you flip that, you then get storyboards pretty much kind of recounting that entire sequence from scratch, pretty much like sketch drawings. I'm assuming they're from Christopher Nolan or from a storyboard artist with a nice little descriptor of what's happening in each shot on the right. And like I said, the filmmaker in me gets tickled by this because obviously it's kind of giving me a look of how the thought process was kind of unfolding when developing this movie. And also the Batman side of me thought to myself, hey, if you look at that final storyboard shot, you'll notice that some of those bats kind of have a striking resemblance to the bat symbol of the new Robert Pattinson Batman. They cut back a little bit on this for The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises respectively. You mostly just get costume artwork or custom sketches for pre-conceptualization of the iconic villains. For example, for The Dark Knight, you have a shot of Heath Ledger's Joker, and when you flip that card, you then get another sketch, a colored up sketch of what was going to be the costume for Heath Ledger's Joker. And then a mostly similar thing for Tom Hardy's Bane here, where you get a shot of him from the movie, and then when you flip the card, you then get just a black and white sketch of what would have been like to have him kind of wrapped up in his coat and his mask. What I thought was kind of amusing was the little scribbles there on the right that are a little difficult to make out because of the Dr. Light prescription writing, but when you kind of take a gander at it there, you can kind of make out words like Churchill and, you know, all these different leaders that they kind of took inspiration from as far as developing his look for the movie. All three sets come with a folded reversible poster, and this is also another thing that I found just a little weak with not just one, not just two, but all three sets, because these posters are pretty much made out of just standard paper that you kind of fold out. But I also noticed some quirks that made me look at the posters and go, I don't know if I would necessarily want to hang these up. You know, they don't look all that great in my personal opinion, because for example, the Batman Begins one, you have a shot of the Batmobile jumping in through the waterfall after the chase scene on one side, and then on the other side you have what kind of to me looks like a Photoshop amalgamation of different elements of the Batcave. You do have Batman there in the middle looking kind of badass, but then on the sides, you can kind of tell that they took pretty much images or still shots of either the Batmobile inside of the Batcave or that Batcave entrance from where he kind of comes down the elevator and just mashed them in there via Photoshop. It just looks like it was just kind of concocted easily on someone's computer, and it doesn't look all that appealing. Then you get to The Dark Knight, where you do get some more respective artwork on one side that kind of reminds me a little bit of that marketing campaign with the Heath Ledger's Joker and Batman flying on his Batpod. And then on the other side, you do get an iconic marketing shot of all three of our main protagonists holding a very essential item covering up half of their face. Again, thematically tied to Two-Face and other elements of the film, with the cast listed at the very top. I would probably make the argument that out of all three, this is probably the one that I would display. Again, it just so happens to land on the more favorable film, The Dark Knight. Then we get a turn for the weird and kind of confusing with The Dark Knight Rises poster, because even though we finally get a vertical poster versus the horizontal ones for the prior two movies, one side of the poster features a very iconic and pretty badass design of one of the famous posters of The Dark Knight Rises in Japanese. I don't know why the lettering is in Japanese. I really don't get it. And I thought to myself that maybe the entire asset was in Japanese, only for me to flip the poster and then we get the variation of the Catwoman poster where she's kind of breaking down one of the batarangs with the heel of her boot. But then you'll notice that the logo is clearly in English with the little lipstick and the two kisses at the bottom there. Again, another iconic shot of The Dark Knight Rises marketing, but it's in English. So why is it that the Bane side is in Japanese? It just, to me, did not make any other sense. And that also caused me concern and made me kind of go back and flip through all the different physical goodies inside of the Dark Knight Rises set. And it's all in English. So I don't know why it is that this particular print, maybe it's a misprint, Maybe it could be valuable later down the line, who knows, but I'm completely flabbergasted. And almost just as flabbergasting, maybe not so much because it's a little bit more understandable considering what they threw in with the Dark Knight set, but the Dark Knight Rises set also comes with this little card insert that has this nice cool little artwork that says Rise with the Bane silhouette right there in the middle. I don't know what exactly is the purpose of this. It looks kind of cool, but it's just a little card insert that they decided to throw in. Maybe it's a way to kind of counterbalance what is arguably my favorite item out of all three of these sets. And yes, it falls on the duties of the Dark Knight set to hold this particular item. Arguably my favorite film out of the series, pretty much everybody's favorite film out of the entire trilogy, comes with a replica Joker card. And that to me is my favorite item. It stands out. When I opened the set and found that in the midst of the photos, the artwork, the booklet, everything right there in the middle, I smiled. No pun intended, but I smiled like a true Batman geek and a true fan of the Dark Knight. I was very proud to know that it comes with its own Joker card. It's meant to be the one that's burnt up in the mayor's car when, spoilers, she blows up, because you can kind of see a little bit of burnt marks on the corners there. The only nitpick I have is that when you flip it, you then get some more really cool artwork there on the back of the card, where you have the traditional kind of suite on the back, the coat on the back of your traditional deck of cards with the Joker smile and Joker eyes. I just don't like how at the top it has the very clear and rather obnoxious label of the Dark Knight, and then on the bottom you have your usual trademark mumbo jumbo. It kind of ruins a little bit of the illusion. I kind of wish that a little bit of that labeling and logoing was just completely erased to make the card feel all the more authentic. So, if you are a fan of Nolan's version of The Dark Knight and you guys want to support the country of Denmark, because that's kind of where these were manufactured, I know, a random fact, but I will say this will definitely be fitting to anyone who's a fan of Nolan's interpretation of the character and wants to have a 4K version enclosed in some really clean steelbooks. Of course, there's going to be some caveats, like I mentioned. It's a shame that Batman Begins doesn't come with its own little unique item, like the Dark Knight came with the card, or the Dark Knight Rises came with the little Bane propaganda little bit there, but at least there's enough collectability going on right here that for roughly somewhere between $50 to $60 per unit, it's actually not a bad pickup, especially when you consider that in the future they could be raising them up in prices, or should stock start to drop because of lack of demand or whatever. So I would probably say that in the meantime, while we wait for one of the US retailers that often specializes in steelbooks, this is a very clean pickup. Of course, you can then take your pick. If you don't want Dark Knight Rises and just go for the Dark Knight, or just go for Batman Begins, you can purchase them individually, and that's ultimately one of the cool things about these sets, that you can then commemorate whichever film you prefer in the best of your ability without really burning too much of a hole in your pocket. And if you guys want to do so, there's going to be links in the description. There are affiliate links to Amazon. They help out the channel, but they can also help you get your own version of these imports as well. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button down below, or hit the thumbs down if you didn't like it. Subscribe for more Batman and Spidey content coming out very soon. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you on the next one.